I think as the afternoon wore on, I got the feeling that we weren't going to quite make it out of this, so I think I did say a prayer or two, and I thought of my family, especially. And, I was getting really pissed off.
Laurie Drinkwater came up to me, or crawled up to me and said, "Hey Skip, do you reckon we're going to get out of this?" And I looked at him and I sort of thought to myself, well, the artillery's been falling for about 2 hours. The armour is about an hour overdue. It's raining like we've never seen before. I've never really been seriously shot at, and there's some turkey out there trying to kill me. And I looked him straight in the eye and said, "I don't think so, Laurie, I don't think so."
We were moving through young rubber trees and through what turned out to be a fairly sticky sort of weed about waist deep in height. And for this very reason, we virtually drove in on top of elements of the VC, which later turned out to be parts of D445 battalion, without seeing them. We only saw them when they stood up in front of us. And at that stage, we came under fairly heavy fire.
The first thing I thought was that I'd come on D Company. It's raining, you understand, and the visibility's not all that good. As I peered at them, they had webbing and the gear on, and they had bush hats, but the bush hats were round. And almost at that instant, a far right-hand carrier, commanded by Corporal Goss, in fact, came across the radio saying, "They're the enemy," and with that he opened fire. And then we opened fire across the line.
The heavy rain and the battle noise made it impossible to hear the tanks coming, and the high grass of the rainy season made it hard to see them until they were right there next to us. We felt determined and unafraid, and we turned and fired at them. I raised my pistol and fired twice before being shot through the head. The bullet went in one side of my head and out the other.
My half of the platoon in the armoured personnel carrier that I was in dismounted, and so did the other half from the adjacent personnel carrier. We then moved into extended line on the right flank of the company, and we actually commenced to assault towards the enemy, which at this stage were starting to stand up and stream from left to right in front of us.
And then I strained my ears to hear, and in the background over to the right I could hear rumbling. And a swell in my stomach took over, and I thought, someone's coming. We're gonna get out of this.
He went forward, and I should say at this stage there was quite literally a wall of artillery falling between us and where D Company was, which was designed obviously to protect them from the enemy. I went forward through this artillery, which was a pretty interesting experience. I remember actually reaching down and putting my steel helmet on my head. I can't imagine what I thought it was going to do, but I put it on my head.
The lights of the APCs came through the rubber trees, came through the rain. I could see the tracer as they were coming through, they were firing, and I thought, you beaut, we're home and hosed.
I swung a complete 90 degrees with my carriers, and we swept to the east. The fire that came back at us as we went that way was absolutely incredible.
Once the APCs came in, the VC disappeared.
That night, the Australians were in bitter despair. They thought they had suffered a great defeat by the Viet Cong. 1/3 of D Company had been killed or wounded, a huge military and personal loss in Australia's small army. But next day, when the Australians re-entered Long Tan Plantation, they were amazed to find hundreds of Viet Cong dead. Later, the captured diary of a Viet Cong commander listed his losses at 500 men. The Australians had won a great military victory.
It's my estimation that because of the communication problems that the enemy was having, that he could never identify where the Australians were. Had he been able to do that at any stage during the whole 3 hours or so, if the enemy commander had simply said to his troops, "Form a line, stand up, let's go," and they would have just walked all over us, even without rifles, I think, at certain stages when we were running low on ammo. And they would have just been through us like a dose of salts.
Viet Cong propaganda reacted quickly to their military disaster. They told the local villagers they had wiped out the Australians and that the people could return to their farms inside Line Alpha. the Viet Cong were awarded decorations for heroism against the Australians. The American and Australian press celebrated the Australian victory at Long Tan, ranking it with some of the great stands of military history. President Johnson awarded D Company the rare Presidential Unit Citation for courage in the presence of an armed enemy, and 15 Commonwealth decorations were awarded to Major Smith and his men. But Canberra denied the young diggers medals. To save face, Saigon awarded them national dolls.
I was actually despairing as to these young 18-year-olds never being in combat, not a great deal of training, and I was completely wrong. Their strength of character, their ability, their bravery, exceptional bravery that they had, was the... I've been in 7 theatres of war in all, and I've never seen anything like it. At that stage, I originally came from England, and I had still got English nationality. And right at that moment, I just wanted to be an Australian. I was going to live the rest of my life here, but just the bravery of those men was the deciding factor that made me become an Australian.
The Battle of Long Tan demolished forever the myth of Viet Cong invincibility, and never again did the Viet Cong seriously challenge the Australians. By 1972, the Australians could go unarmed in Phuoc Tuy. D445 Guerrilla Battalion became non-operational, reduced to foraging for food in remote areas. Media coverage of the Vietnam War has rarely recognised the Australian achievements in Vietnam. But in Australia, on each Long Tan anniversary, the Vietnam veterans march to tell the world we won our Vietnam War.